Thank you very much. Thank you. Ministers, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning. I have a chart. Maybe they can put it up for me.
Here we are, yeah.
So this chart shows the last 65 million years of temperature on planet Earth. And I'd like to make 4 points this morning. There's a forecast that shows to 2100 from the IPCC, and you can see on the right-hand side of the chart the temperature in September this year. It was the highest for 100,000 years. So my first point is that we're a decade away from kicking off a climate crisis. In September, the average global temperature was 1.8 degrees above the pre-industrial average. The United Nations has said to us that we need to keep below 1.5 degrees, but we're already there. We haven't seen the impact of 1.5 degrees yet. We won't see it perhaps for another decade, but we've already hit that level. And emission levels are still at record levels, and they're still rising. And the evidence is all around us, from higher temperatures to floods and wildfires, from droughts to melting ice caps. Greece has had more experience of climate change than many other places. If we continue like this, we will pass the 2-degree emissions threshold within 10 years. That doesn't mean that we will hit 2 degrees within 10 years. It means that the concentration of gases in the atmosphere will be above the level which makes 2 degrees impossible. Two degrees doesn't sound like much, but despite what the climate skeptics say, it's a very big increase. It's the highest change in more than 10,000 years. A 2-degree increase kicks off a chain reaction. The polar ice caps and glaciers will melt faster. That will make the planet less reflective, so it will absorb more of the sun's heat. A 2-degree increase will make the wildfires worse, so more of the forests will burn, and they will release more of their CO2, and that will also increase temperatures. We kick off a chain reaction which will make the planet hotter steadily. If we pass 2 degrees, we will go to 3 degrees and 4 degrees, and there's nothing much we can do about that. And that's what will happen by the end of this century unless we change. A change of this magnitude will eventually take the planet back more than 15 million years. That won't happen quickly, but it's what's in store for us unless we change. The second point I want to make is that all those targets and all those efforts to cut emissions in Europe won't change anything. Most of the net zero targets are for 2050. In China, the net zero target is 2060. That's far too far into the distance to make any difference at all. The tipping point comes in 10 years. So all those targets 30 years from now will not make any difference. Solar panels, electric cars, and wind farms won't make any difference now either. And nor does anything we do in Europe make any difference. Europe accounts for 15% of global emissions. So even if we could wave a magic wand and stop all those emissions tomorrow, we will still only cut a fraction of the total. The other 85% would continue, and so the problem would be the same. If Europe stopped all emissions, it might delay the kickoff of a crisis by perhaps a year, but that's all. My third point is that we need global cooperation to solve this problem. Climate change can only be solved by international cooperation. What the UN and the IPCC is doing is not enough. The biggest emitters are China and the US, so we need them to work together. We also need the other big emitters to work with them. That means Europe, India, Russia, and Japan. It also means Australia and Canada. We also need to include the main countries that generate so much of the fossil energy: Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Canada, Iran, Kazakhstan. My fourth point, my final point, is that unless we come together, the economic costs and the human casualties will be worse than in any conflict. By 2050, 500 million people will have been displaced by rising sea levels. Droughts in Africa and India will force many more millions to migrate. Wildfires in the US and around the Mediterranean will make many places impossible to live. Even by the end of this century, we risk a 50% decline in GDP. And longer term, some estimates suggest we will have a 90% reduction in human life. And that's as well as many other species. These numbers are scary, and that's why we need to make governments understand what's at stake, to help people come together. We all care about the future of humanity. We all care about the future of the planet. But what's missing is understanding. We need to make sure that more people understand what's happening and what's at stake. This is where Europe can act as a convener, a catalyst for change. You're all people of great influence and economic and political power, so I ask for your help. It seems clear that those in power don't understand what's happening. They don't understand the risks or how close we are to irreversible change. So please help me make them aware, because only through cooperation can we build a more sustainable world. Thank you.